Welcome to the Gary Null Show, a program designed to enhance mental, physical, and spiritual well-being through science and the wisdom of the ages. Let us take you on a journey of empowerment. Sit back, relax, and get ready to change your life for good.
Hi everyone, I'm Gary Null and I'd like to welcome you to a continuing part of our series on self-empowerment. I've probably done maybe 100 different lectures, each one trying to focus on a different aspect of human nature. Well, today we are going to do it a little differently. Instead of me being here and just doing an hour, hour and a half, 2-hour lecture on a given topic straight, instead, I've asked my radio audience, which is worldwide, what are the issues that are important to you? What are the questions that you would find beneficial if you had a good answer? And I'm going to try to give you the best answer I can. I'll be doing this lecture on the subject of love, what love is, what it's not. And let's face it, we all have dealt with love issues at different times in our life, even if we're not always aware of it. I would like to think that this world would be a much different place if we could manifest unconditional love for ourselves and for other people. Let's see what these questions are now, and we're going to take them on. Luann Panesi. Hi, Luann.
Hi, Gary.
Okay, one question at a time. Let's take them on.
Okay, number one, what is love?
Love is the sense of the connection to all people and all things in life at the spiritual level, that we are all connected. George Leonard, a great writer, he talked about the silent thread. We are all connected by a silent thread, and boy, was he right. So when I look at a person, I don't look at the color of their skin, I don't look at their race, I don't look at their age, I look at it as a sacred human being. Now, a person can choose not to act sacred, not to show love. Okay, they can exclude themselves from sitting at my table, but my love will allow everyone to sit at my table until they exclude themselves. And so therefore, love is the sacred connection to all people and all things.
Love is the highest, most powerful force in the universe, and that to shape one's life, one must believe in the power of love. And if ever you have a doubt about anything, or you're lost, or you don't have a direction to go, you always follow the power of love. The answer is always to come from the heart. And what is love? Love is the ability to have kindness and empathy and openness and a sense of connection with others and with life.
What is deep love? Deep love is not a feeling or a psychic state of mind. It is the flow of the energy of the universe itself. So whether you're using the Tao language or the Buddha language or the Christ language or the Yahweh language or Allah, the infinite is infinitely connected. Infinite union and communion and unity and flow and harmony. And that harmony is love, where everything's in this nonviolent flow. If that's love, and it's the fabric of reality itself, the essence of being, to use that talk, then in a way, if we are in touch by some miracle with that flow of love, which our teachers have called us to do, because when we break out of an ego-separated, cut-off form of life, an ego-based way of looking at yourself, which disconnects you, to an awakened space, letting go of that ego box and stepping outside into love, to touch reality and interconnectivity, to see the beauty of nature in that sunset, to see the beauty in that person's eyes, your beloved's eyes, or the beauty of your child, or in the words of your teacher, whatever it may be. That love is all foundationally interconnected with interconnected flow of reality. When you touch interconnectivity, you're touching the fabric, the energy of reality itself. And in that flow of communion, that deep love, that is really at the heart of all forms of love. So when we hear in our spiritual traditions that God is love, for example, or love one another, or to love God is to love one another, and so forth, these are all axioms and theorems of the same principle, that we are love. because the energy of reality is the energy of harmonious communion.
Is unconditional love always based on a spiritual and heart energy exchange?
Yes, it is. We like to think that love is a commodity we can barter. Oh, I love you, I don't love you. Oh, I was in love with you, but I fell out of love with you. This is all nonsense. This is the problem we have. We've confused what love is with need. So if someone says, I need you, they would be more accurate than if they said, I love you. Love isn't something that you give to a person and exclude from other people. Love is what you are.
Unconditional love is not the same as ego-based love. Ego-based relationships, ego-based life is disconnected, fragmented, polarized. And Martin Buber, for example, trying to get this vocabulary. So there's a difference between the I-it, where the other is an it, an object, an entity, and I-thou, where the other is a person, a mensch, a lover. And yet, our societies continue to be illiterate on these two dimensions of language and living and relating or not relating. If you're living in an ego-based, I-it, ego-mental life, love in this deeper sense is not available. We're cut off. Yet it calls us in every pulse of our life because life is love. So that in this language, if you can go into the deeper flow that Jesus understood, he spoke from love. He was love. When he spoke from love, he saw interconnectivity, even with your enemy. Love your enemy. Or the call to the origins of our Judaic tradition. Love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. It's a love issue. What is it to love God? To be in the communion of that interconnectivity, which is unconditional love. Conditioned love is ego-based love with conditions. If I get this, you give that, you're an object, you objectify one another and yourself, and love disintegrates. You can't have real love. So our great teachers understood, Buddha understood, in the principle of interconnectivity, which is called compassion, which is feeling with and compassion with, passion with. That is love. When you flow in compassion, in the zone of reality, you feel your interconnectivity with the other.
We are all born a perfect love. There's not a human being ever born that wasn't perfect. That doesn't mean they end up perfect. Look at all the mistakes people make. Look at the prisons filled with people who commit crimes. Look at the people who should be in prison and never got convicted of the crimes. You have love at every single second of your life. It's just, are you allowing it to manifest? Are you accessing it, or have you blocked it? Have you denied it? Have you discouraged it? Has your conditioning in life, the circumstances you've been in, the pain you have felt, the anger you have felt, the overcompensation for feeling inferior, has that caused you to block this off, shut it away, hide it down, and then when you are greedy, you are selfish, you are inconsiderate, you are vulgar, you are rude and crude and violent, when you support wars and nihilistic and nationalistic behavior, when you can be racist and misogynist and indifferent, and never think that somehow you're a bad person, but someone else is. Do you think that 50 million Germans were all happy people? Do you think any of them ever questioned whether or not they were doing? Most did not. Well, what happened to their love? What happened to the Japanese love when they bombed Pearl Harbor? What happened to those people who bombed us in 9/11? What happened to the terrorists today around the world? What happened to their love? They were born with it. They chose not to manifest it. Unconditional love would never allow you, ever, to commit an act of violence against another human being.
Love has the power to change the world if our political leaders valued that above all else, above all righteousness, or above all this God against that God, us versus them. Then we would have the power to create some kind of enduring peace. But the thing about knowing the power of love, one must find it through intuition. This isn't just through the mind. One must feel the power of love in oneself and allow it, that experience, to propel yourself and to believe in it. It's not something you can think your way towards. It's something you must believe in, and you must know that the power of love is greater than any darkness, greater than any fear. And if political leaders and social leaders set that as a priority, then when they go into their summits, when they go into all of these meetings, they can set that intention to resolve the differences and not get caught up in the tit-for-tat, linear mind interactions that will only create war, because from an intuitive standpoint, there is absolutely no such thing as us versus them. Nothing. It's only we.
What we talk about as love is the opposite of fear, and this is really what the primary duality is focused on. Fear is the experience of being repulsed by a stimulus, and love is actually being attracted by a stimulus. So love is anything that's in the environment that pulls your attention and attracts you to create harmony in your life, which is absolutely the opposite of fear, which is something that repels you and forces you away from that stimulus.
Unconditional love is the spiritual values that we are all born with, and simply honor it. When you can honor the positive spiritual side of your nature, you are then not honoring the conditioned, destructive, dark side of our nature. They are both present every second of our life. The person that focuses upon what love is and how to manifest it is the person that will be considered the kind person, the thoughtful person, the selfless person, the good person.
Love is opening the space, the sacred space, to encounter the other. Let her or him speak in her own voice to you. Then love flows. That's unconditioned love. So when we don't have unconditional love and we're illiterate and blocked and cut off from that, it is a desperate, tragic situation to enter into real love.
We need people in positions who are coming from a spiritual point of view, who do not recognize one religion better than another, one people better than another, who will look to heal the problems we have by giving. Love does not accept an artificial boundary. Love will not exclude you from the table of life. You're not told you're not good enough, smart enough, rich enough, elite enough. You didn't go to Harvard or Yale or Princeton. Look at what little context they're able to live in. They have intellects without context. And that's like seeing one leaf on a tree and missing the entire forest.
I teach at Columbia University. This is supposed to be a great university. We don't teach our students how to be decent human beings. The president in convocation when they arrive, maybe in graduation when they leave, maybe says something about, mentions the word decency. And you're supposed to be decent. But actually all they're trained is how to be manipulative, how to be clever, how to trick and outwit people, and also how to operate under high stress, deferred gratification, to get always like rats on a treadmill to another goal and achieve some new thing, what you're talking about, the high achiever. And then they're supposed to get ahead. So then naturally, until recently, they just all want to go straight out to Wall Street, from graduation, rush off to some big firm, and then make more money, and it's all money. And they don't know how to treat their wives. They don't know how to treat their children. They're if they succeed, they have like third trophy wife, 4 sets of divorced children. I mean, it's a mess. They have big money, then they die of a heart attack if they don't have a quadruple bypass to last a couple more years. And it's a worthless life. And this is our fault. The Ivy League, Harvard, all these places, and the prep schools, and even the high schools. And we producing these monsters, really, who are having very unsatisfying lives themselves.
There's a prevalent myth. It has been around for about 100 years. And people think that it has been around at all times, but it's not the case. The myth is that the more money you have, the happier you are. Now, in the Middle Ages, even in our Western world, in Europe, happiness was not conceived purely in terms of material goods. There were the commercial people, there were the merchants, but people who had positions of influence, of status, were not necessarily those who were wealthy. The people who had this status were those who had honor, who could help others around them, who had a position whereby people could look up to them as people of integrity, people of wisdom. Now, today we think status is connected with money. Therefore, money is something that buys things. Money is the key to everything, including happiness. We permit such people to exist because we assume that because they have money, they must be happy. Yet, all the research, and even the everyday evidence, but the sociological research also shows that beyond a certain point of material goods, beyond a certain point of financial accumulation, the happiness quotient goes down. People become more stressed, more worried. I know a number of people who are super rich, who are always concerned about the latest movement in the stock market, or what happens with their enterprises and what the competition does. They can never extricate themselves from the rat race, as it were. And it doesn't help to have a lot of money and a lot of goods, because your neighbor might have a little more. They're always in competition with the others. So happiness is not there. They're simply by being able to accumulate your material goods around you. It's much more coming in to yourself and recognizing that you can fulfill what you're really here for, that you can fulfill by giving and not only by getting, by being part of a community, part of the great rhythms of life, instead of exempting yourself and looking only at your own interest. That doesn't make you happy.
From the earliest ages, we are taught that compromising is the only way to be realistic in this world, and that you have to abandon what you really believe in order to be fitting in to the way things are actually structured in this world. The problem is that the more that we compromise, the more that we abandon the highest things that we believe in: love, kindness, generosity, caring for others, celebrating the grandeur and wonder of the universe, having pleasure and joy at being alive. The more that we sacrifice those in order to achieve whatever is achievable within the way that our workplace is structured, the way our family life is structured, the way our social order is structured, the more we find ourselves being miserable and unhappy. Screw realism. Don't be realistic. Don't be realistic. Don't accommodate to the world the way it is. Try to transform the world. And what you will find is that you're surrounded by people who will be telling you, oh, that's so immature of you, so adolescent, grow up. So one thing I try and tell every group of teenagers that I meet is, don't grow up. If growing up means accommodating to the existing set of constraints in the social order, and to a social order that privileges money, power, domination, and control over others. Instead, hold on to the values of love, of caring for each other, of going for a world that is spiritually and ethically centered, and a life that is spiritually and ethically centered. Do not compromise with that world, and tell your friends and tell the people you know that you don't want to compromise, and you know that they too would love to live in a different kind of world.
During our programming as children, we really observed from our parents and the community around us what we should be doing to become an active and contributing part of our society. And unfortunately, our teachers have not been very good in that regard, because it's really been a whole series of lessons on self-gratification and self-serving and me versus you. And unfortunately, this is the wrong tact. This is not what evolution is all about. The way we have to correct this track is to get out of the old reactive behavior patterns and start generating new behaviors. And what's most interesting is when we really start to understand the nature of love and harmony and the feelings that we get and the health that is a result of those feelings of being in love and harmony, that we will ultimately start to let go of the old beliefs and focus on the new one. And it's very interesting because as a large percent of the population is trying to awaken at this point, awaken to a better understanding of life, a better understanding of health, we find that the media and the religious sources around us are trying to hold us back. And the reason why is because when we become awakened, we become empowered. And the last number of hundreds of years on this planet, the powers to be recognize that by our not being awakened, they control us. And as we start to awaken now, their fear of losing power over us keeps pushing the old story in front of us, the old images, the war, the competition, the battling, rather than giving us the images of what is better than what we have. What is a future we can thrive into? So it really is incumbent upon us as individuals is to take that power back for ourselves, Because once we do, not only do we create harmony and love in our life, but physiologically, we become healthy and grow and have a wonderful experience of living in this garden called Earth.
We have a world in crisis. We have 49.1 million Americans going to bed hungry today. 12 million of those are children. Do you realize that we have school teachers who are so filled with love and compassion that 67% of school teachers say that they feed the children coming to school each day because the kid is embarrassed, doesn't want to say they didn't have breakfast. The poor kid is sitting there in class and the teacher feels such love that they, out of their own pocket, they buy the kid food. Now, we're not talking about a few kids or a few thousand or a few 100,000. We're talking about nearly 13 million American children are hungry. Okay? When members of Congress, both Democratic and Republican, refuse to acknowledge that we created this hunger. We created poverty in the United States. We created human suffering. When we're allowing people, 10,000 a day, to be thrown out in the middle of the cold, the middle of snow, in the middle of storm, where people have no house, they have no car, it's been repossessed, they have no money, and we can throw those people out, that's all coming from a lack of love completely. It is the antithesis of love. It is greed, selfishness. They weren't born that way, but that's what they allowed themselves to be.
There's a big disconnect between those values that we hold of compassion and generosity and the actual way we've organized our society. But the truth of the matter is that most human beings actually desire a world of compassion, a world of generosity, a world of kindness, only they don't think it's possible. And they begin to build fences around themselves in which they screen out the possibilities of being loving and kind and generous on the larger level because they think that it's impossible and that they themselves will be the only ones who go for it. So, for example, there is a tremendous amount of people in the right, the center, and the left who individually engage in acts of caring and generosity. When it comes to the larger sphere, they feel that there's no possibility of changing anything in the larger sphere, and so they accept social policies that are very ungenerous. What appears to be insensitivity is what I call surplus powerlessness. That is, people making themselves feel more powerless than they actually have to be. But that's because each of us approaches it as though we are an individual alone, whereas actually what we need is a social movement that can reinforce our collective capacity to change the world. Let me give you an example. When I pass a person homeless in the street, I immediately ask myself, shouldn't I be bringing this person home to my home? Then I think, well, what about the next person? Shouldn't I also bring that person home to my home? And pretty soon I'm overwhelmed by the thought of, well, wait a second, I don't actually have that much room in my home. And if I have to bring all these people home to my home, and what if it turns out that some of them are actually dope dealers or alcoholics, or that they might rip my home off or whatever. So I begin to feel like, oh no, I'm worrying about myself. I should be worrying about them. But of course, it's reasonable to worry about myself, isn't it? I don't really want to deal with that on the individual level. I wish there were enough housing for everybody, but there isn't enough housing and the society won't build the houses. So I begin to start closing off. I don't want to be in this upset all the time. I do feel tremendous upset when I see people on the streets. And so I begin to close down, to shut off my capacities at generosity and caring for other people. Not because I'm fundamentally ungenerous, but because I see no way that I myself can deal with this. In other words, I don't want to blame any individual American. I don't want to blame people one by one and say, you aren't generous or you aren't caring enough. I do want to say that we need a social movement that can enforce that, can demand it.
I think the time for awakening is coming here. As we're approaching the end of the Mayan age or era or calendar, we're approaching a time when there can be a dramatic shift in our consciousness, in our global consciousness, and our awareness that we are something much more than that empty little person that has to do all these external controlling things and acquiring external things in order to be happy and whole and complete. Once we get past that, then there truly could be peace on earth. I think it's about time. I prefer that over all the wars. How about you?
Are we born with all capacity to love, and then the environment or our conditioning wears away at it?
It doesn't wear away at it. It blocks it. Let's just say that you have a capacity to be a very personable person, right? Mm-hmm. But you found that your parents weren't. Let's just say hypothetically. Mm-hmm. And therefore, when you started showing exuberance and creativity, and you wanted to be more personable, you were the one that would dress up in your mom's dress, a little girl, and run in and surprise everyone. And they say, don't do that. Mm. At a certain time of saying no,
right.
When you realize the average child in the United States has 80 no's for every yes. We grow through yes, we don't grow through no. So then imagine that the love your parents didn't get, how can they give it to you? So if your dad says, I'm going to give you hard love, what your dad is saying, I got hard love, this is the only love I know. Now you interpret love as hard love, conditional love. So now you're not going to be able to share with others what you yourself cannot understand.
But the spiritual teachers like Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Lao Tzu, what they're talking about, real compassion is compassion that embraces all beings. And that takes work to develop. Not every human being has that.
Question of unconditional love, which is not often understood, or even the very topic of love itself is not understood when you look at the wisdom of our great teachers on the planet. That's a perspective I'm bringing, whether you listen to Jesus or Buddha or Moses, Abraham, Mohammed, Lao Tzu, just to name a few, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, or wisdom keepers through the ages, men and women, the great Sophias, who've really given us insights into love, our great scriptures. Love is usually not understood. We're almost illiterate in the language of love because of our ego-based dominant culture. And it all turns on this because our teachers, our wisdom teachers understood that if we're living in an ego mindset or an ego lens of the mind where you see yourself as a separate, disconnected entity and a being, then you're disconnected from reality and the flow, which is profoundly interconnected. Reality is a unified, infinite field and flow of energy. Whatever name you give it, whether it's God, Yahweh, Krishna, yoga, Om, emptiness, Allah, energy of nature, whatever name you use for the fundamental reality, it's well known that there's a fundamental unified field of reality where everything is in a flow of interconnectivity. That is the source of love. So if you call it God or Yahweh, then it follows as an axiom in the science of the unified field that God is love. We've heard that. We don't understand what that means because we use an ego-based language that chops up and disconnects from that flow. To me, this is the fundamental issue regarding love and unconditional love, and the almost pathetic, tragic attempt of ego-based life and cultures and people, disconnected from love.
Hope you've enjoyed it. We'll continue next week. I'll see you then.